This is session 1 on HSFG bolts. So we have started with the bolted connection and we have covered the ordinary black bolts or the design of joints using ordinary black bolts. In this session we are going to see about the HSFG bolts. What are HSFG bolts? What are their advantages and disadvantages? And how do we find the design strength in case of HSFG bolts? Uh, If you compare the ordinary black bolts and HSFG bolts, you can see the difference in the behavior through this particular image, what I have shown over here. So this is how the load resistance or load transfer takes place in a ordinary black bolt or bearing type of bolts. It may be either due to the bearing resistance or due to the shearing resistance of the bolt. Whereas in case of high strength friction grip bolts, the transfer of load is entirely different. The bolts in this case are tightened to their proof stress, and this results in a clamping force over the plates which are connected together. So this is the HSFG bolt which has been tightened sufficiently so that a pre-tension is induced in this. This figure shows the pre-tension which has been developed within the bolt, and because of that there is a bearing pressure developed at the interface of these plates which have been connected over here. So you can see in these two figures how the bearing pressure or the clamping force is developed at the interfaces of the plates. And what happens is, due to this clamping force and the coefficient of friction that is there on this surface based on the nature of surface, so on that a frictional resistance will develop. This frictional resistance will be helpful in transferring the load through the plates. So here the load transfer is entirely due to the frictional resistance that is developed between the interface of the plates. That is how the HSFG bolts differ from ordinary black bolts in case of transferring the loads. So high strength friction grip bolts, they are manufactured using medium carbon steel, and they usually belong to property class of 8.8 to 10.9. So we can understand that the ultimate tensile strength of such bolts is normally above 800 Newton per mm square. That is very much essential because if you want to have a effective clamping force, this bolt has to be tightened sufficiently. It should carry a sufficient pre-tension within it. Only then it can develop a clamping force which can help in resisting the load through friction. That's why we call this bolt as high strength, since it is made of medium carbon steel and the ultimate tensile strength is somewhere above 800 Newton per mm square. And friction grip because of the mechanism of load transfer, what is taking place in the joint. It is due to the friction which is developed at the interface of these plates. So that's why the name high strength friction grip bolts, and in short it is abbreviated as HSFG bolts. So what advantages we have compared to the ordinary black bolts in case of HSFG bolts? The first advantage what we can see here is there is no slip in the connection, and since slip doesn't occur, we can say that the joint is totally rigid, or practically we can have a rigid joint by using the HSFG bolts. Second is the bolts themselves are not subjected to any kind of bearing or shearing stresses as in case of bearing type of bolts. So bolt will not be experiencing any direct bearing and shearing stresses, and that results in the chances of failure of the bolt will be minimized. And here in this case the load transfer is purely through the friction. The third advantage is the connection can withstand the fatigue and dynamic load in a better way. So there are very less chances that these bolts in the connection will become loose under fatigue loading or dynamic loading. So they can withstand this dynamic loading much better than the ordinary black bolts. Normally the bolts what you find in our vehicles, they are high strength friction grip bolts itself. So if you at all see the user manual in any vehicle, the service instructions, you will find that the bolts have to be tightened to the required torque. It will be mentioned that the bolts have to be tightened to the required torque because they need to be put under pre-tension. That is the meaning for of that. And one more advantage what we find is stress concentration at holes is eliminated. So in case of bearing type of bolts, the surface of the bolt hole will be in contact with the bolts. So at this particular region, there is a increased stress intensity. Over a small area, the stress intensity will be more. This is the stress concentration, and that results in tearing of plates or yielding of plates and so on. So that failure of plates may occur because of that stress concentration. So this is totally eliminated in case of high strength friction grip bolts. In this high strength friction grip bolts, the area over which the friction develops will be very large. So no, there are very less chances that the plate may fail because of the stresses being exceeded at the critical section. And you also find that the number of bolts required in case of high strength friction grip bolts are less. So the size of the connection and the size of the gusset plate and all, if any required, will become smaller. So you are saving material as well as we are also having a, connection size of a small size. The HSFG boards also have some disadvantages. One is they are costlier because they are made up of medium carbon steel, which is a better material than the ordinary steel. So the cost will be higher compared to the ordinary black boards. Second is there is a significant effort involved in fabrication of these connections. That is, these connections require additional things like washers to be inserted in the bolts. So the process of connecting these bolts is little bit tedious as compared to the ordinary black bolts. And also special procedures have to be followed so that the clamping action will be achieved in this case. That is, you need to use special wrenches or machines so that you'll tighten them sufficiently and the pre-tension gets developed in the bolt. And for these things to be done, you also require skilled laborers. So these are the advantages as well as disadvantages. And these washers, what you see in this figure, they are very much essential in case of HSFG boards. If not, these edges of the bolt head or the nut will try to punch into this bolt hole because this bolt has been put into a pre-tension. It will be carrying a force within itself which will try to punch through this bolt hole. It may damage that bolt hole edges and the edges may yield over here. So providing this washer ensures that this clamping force is distributed over a larger area and it is distributed uniformly. That is the necessity of these washers in the HSFG bolt. Okay, now coming to the design strength, this is what I have taken from IS 800 2007. clause is 10.4 and page number 76 and 77. You'll find these two columns in these two pages. So it ensures that it is to ensure that the applied shear force is less than the design shear capacity of that HSFG bolt. That is what the requirement is here. Now, what is the design capacity of this HSFG bolts? That is VDSF. So that will be VNSF, nominal shear capacity of the friction grip bolt, divided by the factor of safety, suitable factor of safety, gamma MF. So in order to get this VNSF, the nominal shear capacity, you can see this equation. It is having these parameters, what you can see here. So mu f is the coefficient of friction in this. Ne is the number of the number of interfaces which are offering the frictional resistance. Kh a factor depending on the size of the bolt hole, and F naught is the force in the bolt, what pretension is developed in the bolt. So mu f, it depends on what is the nature of surface of the plates or the members which are connected together. Okay, so this table 20 in page 77 of the code will give you different values of coefficient of friction depending on what is the type of surface that are involved in that joint. So you can choose a suitable value of mu f, the coefficient of friction, from this table. If at all, if you don't have any idea of that nature of surface, then a coefficient of friction of 0.55 can be adopted. Ne will be the number of interfaces which are offering the frictional resistance. It depends on what number of plates have been connected together. If only two plates are there, there is only one plane. Ne will become 1. That is, only one interface is there which is offering the frictional resistance over there. Kh is a factor depending on the bolt hole. So if at all, if the bolt holes are with standard clearance, Kh will be 1. If they are oversized, then Kh value will be 0.85. And in case of long slotted holes, Kh has to be taken as 0.7. And gamma MF is the factor of safety. If you want to ensure that the slip won't occur under service load, the factor of safety to be adopted is 1.1. And if you are ensuring the slip resistance at the ultimate load, that is, if you are not allowing any slip to occur at ultimate load, the factor of safety is 1.25. So these are the two values of factor of safety in this, 1.1 and 1.25, depending on at what particular condition slip resistance has been designed. F naught is the tension in the bolt which is being induced. So it depends on the effective cross-sectional area of the bolt multiplied by the proof stress. As we have seen that these bolts are manufactured with medium carbon steel, they don't exhibit any clear yield point. And in such cases, we go for proof stress. In this case, the proof stress that has to be chosen is 0.7 times the ultimate tensile strength of the bolt. 0.7 into FUB will be your proof stress. And the ANB is the net area of the bolt at the threads. This is the same area what we used to take in case of the bearing type of bolts. So A and B will be 0.78 times the gross area. So A and B and the proof stress when multiplied together will tell you what is the pre-tension that is induced in the bolt. So this will tell us what will be the design strength of a high strength friction grip bolt. So this is the session on HSFG bolts, first session. In the further session, we'll take up problems related to this HSFG bolts. Thank you.